Hey everybody, welcome into this week's episode of Tony's Spot on Fishing. I'm your host, Tony Krizek, and today we're finally answering the call. We have had emails, Facebook messages, Facebook Messenger messages, you name it, any means to get a hold of us here at Spot on Fishing. The number one request has been to come to Busse Woods and film out here. Now, over 27 years at least in this business, I've never actually fished Busse myself before. This is going to be a first. And what we actually want to do is set up a small mini series for you of just how we can come out here, break down this lake for you, show you how we would attack it based off of the fact we've never been here, using our maps, and using just any knowledge we've gotten from people we've talked to, who we've fished with before that have had experience out here, and how we bring it all together to help you catch more fish, even if it's your first time or if you've been a seasoned Busse angler. That's what this series is going to be about. We're going to do several shows out here this year breaking down Busse for you guys. Today I'm joined by my good friend Eric Wirag. We'll see him in a little bit. He's one of the guys that really knows this water well, and he's going to help us dial it in. We're shore-bound today. We're going to show you how to shore fish it. We're targeting muskies, pike, and even bass. And we're going to show you all the tips, tricks, and techniques of how you can catch them from shore at Busse. That's all this week on Tony's Spot on Fishing. This first spot we're fishing here at Busse, we're actually right near the boat ramps and the boat rental section. And this is one area that, based off of talking to people and even from Eric, has told us on several occasions that muskies have been caught right here, literally just pitching baits into the slips of the docks here. And we can run a variety of baits over the weed flats here. And what we're actually starting out with, got a little bit of veggies on it there, is actually the Frenchie from Muskie Attacker. And it's actually our little bluegill pattern that Muskie Attacker produces. Normally we tip it with an orange blade. We actually switched up to the gold just to get a little more flash to it. Water has a little bit of a stain to it. This will give us just a little flash. And generally speaking, we like to look at bluegill type patterns, baby bass, more natural, even the shad patterns, perch patterns, walleye patterns. We keep it fairly natural out here as everything that we've been told about this body of water and about this lake. And we can just go through and fan cast it and pitch into the piers, pitch around, hit your pockets on the weed flat itself. Now, obviously, we're not able to figure eight being up on shore here, and we have a real thick mat right in front of us. So if we do have fish following, we're kind of at the mercy here to just let them, hopefully get them to eat prior to getting into the real shallow stuff here. Now, one thing you may have already noticed is I'm not actually running my full muskie setup. I'm actually running my real heavy flipping stick. This is actually what I would normally frog with. And the rod handles up to a 2.5 ounce lure weight. But it's actually my frogging stick. And we're not actually running real big baits. The key is we don't need to come out here when we're targeting the pike and muskies to look at throwing the big cable model bucktail or a 2-hook. We're not throwing the real big musky baits. The forage overall is fairly small that they're eating. They're eating a lot of bluegills, perch, smaller shad, so we can keep it downsized. Now, I'm still running a leader. I'm not running straight steel. It's a 7-strand coated because, of course, we are dealing with toothy critters. We get a fish that inhales it a little bit too much, have a fish eat it and roll on it. We want to protect it from those gill plates, so still running a leader, but my frogging rod and with a high capacity reel that we're actually still putting the 50-pound braid to. Now, we got plenty of backbone to this setup. Anybody who has talked with me over the years about muskies, I always talk about never going out undergunned. And the reason for that is we don't want to fight fish to the point of exhaustion. So many times I've had guys talk to me, oh, I love to fight and, you know, the battle with the fish, and I want to have fun with it. You're actually doing more harm than good. And what you want to do is actually end the battle as quick as possible. Pike and muskies will build up an acid in their muscles when they fight too hard or for too long. Now, even though those fish swim off just fine, to our eyes it looks like they were fine. In truth, they can actually suffer post-release death syndrome, which is where they'll actually swim off, and unfortunately they can't reabsorb that acid that their muscles produced fighting over overstressed battle, and now you're going to kill that fish. He'll swim off, but within 24 hours that fish is dead. So we still want to end the battle as fast as possible. But since we're not throwing the big 6-inch and 8-inch and 10-inch baits here, we're keeping it downsized, we can go a little bit lighter to this real heavy bass setup. Still have plenty of backbone to turn these fish, the good braided line so we can get the good hook sets on these fish, and we're also able to land them quickly, release them properly, they're nice and healthy. So it's definitely about having the right gear to come out here with. You don't want to come out undergunned by any means. And you'll even see later on, we're going to throw some safety pin style spinnerbaits as well, just 3/8 ounce, half-ounce spinnerbaits. And generally speaking, I have a rod specifically built and designed for spinnerbaits, but even that, we've upped it a little bit to a little heavier rod. There's been so many times where we've fished Shabbanoff and we're out there bass fishing. And we've actually encountered where we're hooking the muskies, but we just can't turn them on that gear. And it's a losing battle. So the first thing is make sure you got gear that'll do the job for you out here. We don't want to do anything that'll hurt the fish. We want to do everything we can to put the odds in our favor. Now, when you're throwing downsized baits like this, you can catch a lot of bass doing it. Both on the Frenchie bucktails, obviously the 3/8 ounce and half-ounce bass spinnerbaits are designed for them. But we've seen and heard of muskies being caught on baits like this, red-eye shads, hard and soft plastic jerk baits, even guys that are pitching jigs, skirted jigs and a craw trailer have caught them. Now, one last piece of advice, as we've been talking and fan casting here as we're going, what we want to do is obviously focus on covering water. We're not going to stay in one place too long. It does no good to actually pound an area to a froth by any means. There's just no reason to do that. We're looking for active fish. We're trying to find the active ones. So cover in water, fan cast the area. If you're not seeing fish, if you want to just grab a different bait quick, just to give them a different look and then move on, that's all you got to do. We're not going to stay put too long on a place like this. And especially when we're dealing with pike and muskies, where these are fish that won't school up together like bass. You may have a couple on a weed flat together, but they're not really schooled up tight together. They may be just hanging out on a weed flat, waiting for something to come over so they can ambush it. Or they're just roaming, searching for food themselves. And it does no good to actually stay put too long. Now, I just mentioned that it's not a bad idea to throw a couple different baits into a section. And actually, my cameraman had noticed when I was talking, throwing the inline, it appeared to be a small pike follow in. I actually didn't see him. I was too busy talking. And I had mentioned about switching it up before you move. Now, we're going to make a few more casts here just because we did see that pike there, and knowing that this is a decent spot. And I mentioned, aside from the inlines, we can also run what we call a safety pin style spinnerbait. Now, the safety pin style spinnerbait is just your traditional bass spinnerbait. It's the wire arm hence kind of resembling a safety pin closure. And this is actually from War Eagle. One little thing, when we get these spinnerbaits, and pretty much any spinnerbait for that matter, with the exception of some of the Strike King Premier Pro models now, they're only going to come with that one single hook. What we do is we add a little Gamakatsu trailer hook to it, a little bit of medical grade tubing there just to keep the hook in place so it's not going all over the place, but it gives us that second hook. Anytime you're dealing with pike and muskies, even bass for that matter, if they're short striking, that little spare hook back there helps get those fish that just kind of come up and nip on it. But even in the muskie world, when we're throwing a full-size muskie size safety pin spinnerbait, having the two hooks to it, single hooks and pike and muskies, because of the bone and cartilage structure, it gets dicey with single hooks. They tend to throw them quite a bit, so having that extra hook there gives us just a little bit extra, little extra hooking ability there. Now with a safety pin style spinnerbait, we're going to cut back on the wire leader. Mainly there's enough metal up in front. I'm not too overly concerned about teeth doing some major damage to it. And we also have to remember that we're not talking true giants here. You know, mid-30s, of course, be a very good fish out here at Busse. And I'm sure that there are fish pushing the 40-inch mark out here. The forage base is here, that's for sure. But generally speaking, mid-30s are very common. So we're not dealing with true monsters. So we can get away when we're doing like a spinnerbait, a safety pin style spinnerbait, we can get away with just running it as it is. This next spot we're fishing here at Busse, we're actually not far from the ramp and the boat rentals here, is a nice start to this little channel. And it runs right alongside this island area and the shoreline. It's about 7.5 feet deep. So we got some good depth. There's a little bit of rock. There's obviously a little timber off the island, some isolated vegetation here and there. And these are the kind of areas that we want to scout and look for when we're fishing muskies and pike and even bass for that matter out here. We like that whole mix of cover where you have different types of structure. Like I said, rock, weed, timber, the channel itself. The channel is going to act like a highway. Now think about when you're driving down the expressway and you come to the oasis. So you're cruising down the highway, you're hungry, you stop in the oasis and you get something to eat. The fish utilize the channel as their highway. These parts of structure are what is their oasis, because that's where the food's going to be it panfish, be it shad, craws, whatever the case may be. So having structure and having that structure near the main channel are keys when you're first coming to Busse to start focusing on these type of areas first. This is where we can find fish right off the bat. We can hopefully get fish moving, get some strikes, even maybe possibly land one. And again, being a first trip, you can't always expect, especially on a body of water that's as pressured as Busse. This is probably one of the most famous forest preserves in Illinois. It gets a tremendous amount of fishing pressure, not only from shore anglers, but from boaters as well. The high school teams use it for their tournaments. It gets a tremendous amount of pressure. So if you're a first timer out here and you don't catch a fish, you don't see fish, you don't get fish going, that's no reason to really get overly excited or upset, because it's all part of the learning curve. It's kind of the whole fail thing, F-A-I-L. First attempt is learning. And that's what you have to keep in mind when you're learning new water. And that's really what my favorite part of the whole thing is about, is learning new water, learning how and where these fish are at. It's the whole challenge. It's putting the pieces of the puzzle together. Most guys and girls like to just come out, be able to go out and catch fish. Don't get me wrong, I love having days like that. But to me, the most fun part is putting all the pieces of this puzzle together on a new body of water and figuring it out. And we wanted to do it today from shore to show you just how on a big body of water, because there is a tremendous amount of water out here, just how we can still break it down, utilize the maps. There's maps all over at the parking entrances here. It gives you the depth, the structure, so you can kind of figure out where you're at and what you're fishing and base your presentations off of that. We generally want to throw more moving baits, search baits, in situations like this, just so we can cover water quickly, find out exactly what structure's here. And honestly, moving fish or catching fish, especially dealing pike and muskies, on the first day out here, that's the bonus. The key is learning the spots, and once you have your spots, you can come back, redial it in, and find these fish again and catch them. So here's one part of this whole learning curve that we've been talking about today. And that is some things that we just didn't quite account for. One of them being all this cottonwood that is on the water. Now, generally speaking, most rods come with traditional guides. You don't have much of an issue. The particular rod I'm running actually has the micro guides. Now, the micro guides do actually wondrous things. They actually help achieve more casting distance because your line doesn't have much slack to it. So it keeps it in line with your rod and helps it shoot it. So you actually do get more distance, which is very good when we want to cover water like this. And especially in a situation like this where we're throwing towards this island, we want to be able to fish that shoreline as well as the shoreline that is right in front of us. We can throw parallel to it as well. The downside to micro guides and cottonwood is it gets tangled up in these micro guides and it just becomes a mess. You have issues casting, it builds up enough, it can slow down your retrieves. So there's definitely a love-hate relationship right now with a micro guide rod. At least in this particular section we're in right now where there is a tremendous amount of this stuff. Now the good thing is running the leader on the inlines, it's actually keeping all that away from my bait, so I'm not having to worry about my bait constantly being fouled by it. We just don't want it to become an issue where we can't reel in a fish because we have all this cottonwood, or we're constantly backlashing because it's interfering with our casting. But just one of those other little curves, learning curves that we just didn't think about ahead of time would be an issue. Now I do have another rod that I can swap it out with, so it's not a big issue. Well, we've done a little bit of fishing here, and as we had talked about in the opening, my good friend Eric Wirag's with me. Eric, welcome in, my friend.
Thanks, Tom.
Eric has been fishing Busse now. How long have you been fishing out here?
Probably for the last 30 years.
30 years?
Since I was about 16, 17, yeah.
Now, Eric is the one we're leaning on pretty heavily here for a lot of the information on just learning stuff, where the channels are, where the vegetation's at, different structural points. And you know, what exactly, I mean, are we fishing here primarily this stretch near the island, this whole channel stretch, and what have you caught through this section? What makes it so good?
Because it's a low flat, it's about 6.5, 7.5 feet in spots. It's got a lot of vegetation, a lot of breaks in it. A lot of boat traffic goes through here from the boat rental. We see a lot of bass. I catch a lot of bass through here, and I have picked off my one muskie that I caught here unbelievably. Crappie, I've caught a few crappie up front by the front channel. That's basically it. I mean, you could, if you wanted to downsize and fish bluegill, they're prevalent in here also. You can have a lot of fun with an ultralight.
I know, we talked about you mentioned your muskie there, and if I remember right, the story you told me, you caught him actually on a jig and craw, wasn't it?
Yes, a 3/8 ounce jig with a pack of craw trailer, just actually fouled the bait casting reel, getting the snag out, and he hit it off the bottom.
Unbelievable.
I have no idea how.
Unbelievable. Mm-hmm. So we know there's muskies, there's pike,
There's largemouth, smallmouth in here.
Largies. I've never caught a smallie in here.
Okay, and we've seen, the limit signs up for the walleyes, of course, all your panfish species, bluegills and crappies out here. What has been your best time of year out here? Spring, summer, fall?
Spring and fall I do really good. Once it heats up in the summer, it becomes like you have called it, a pretty tricky fishery. I mean, you have your hit or miss days. I mean, I've come out here in the summertime before the heat really gets up and done really well, or I've blanked. I mean, I've had a lot of blank days out here, but holds a lot of fish and a lot of different spots. I mean, we couldn't cover all the spots in one day of filming, so as you know, it's a large lake.
And then primarily, I know you do a lot of focusing mainly on the bass out here, but I know you and your friends have caught them on the muskies, rather, on red-eye shads, spinnerbaits even, probably, the jigs.
I mean, I switch up, from day to day, just going by seasonality, your top water fishing, early morning, first light, I do really well with top waters, buzz baits even. But yeah, red-eye shads in the spring and a lot in the fall too. For some reason I get going on the red-eyes in the fall. But then I hit the Senkos. Like today I'll probably be fishing a lot of Senkos, different styles of wacky rigs or even Texas rig Senkos.
How bad will the vegetation get? Say we get into the heart of summer out here. Are we talking thick mats or still fishable from shore?
That varies with the different spots. I mean, this channel doesn't get too bad, but it holds its vegetation so that you can actually hold fish in here. Otherwise, it'd be a barren wasteland. But I mean, different spots with low current, they'll get more weedy, but just like anywhere else.
Excellent. Well, how do you say we get on them and try and get a few fish here?
Let's go for it.
Let's do it, man.
All right.
I like the shirt, by the way.
Now, the one thing we talked about was changing baits. And of course, we talked with Eric about the exact type of presentations that he's had his most success with out here. And aside from a spinnerbait or an inline spinner, the other key bait, moving bait, that we can cover water with is the red-eye shad. Now we're running the 1/2 ounce size. And the reason we want to run the 1/2 ounce size is just because of the fact we are going to encounter some weed flats through here. The 3/4 is going to be a bit much. So that 1/2 ounce red eye is the perfect size, and it's about the size of a lot of these shad. Now we've seen a couple fish come up. Most of them have been bass, but we have noticed a couple of them come up that a little too big of a swirl, had to probably be either a pike or a ski. But the thing they're chasing are these smaller shad that are out here. So we don't really want the bigger presentations. It goes back to the old routine of matching the hatch, which is exactly what we're doing. If they're feeding on small shad, we don't want to come out throwing big minnow body baits. And actually there was a little shad was just swimming right alongside of it, about that big. So that's something they're going to really feed on quite heavily. Now, it's not to say they're not eating the bluegills and crappies and small bass and walleyes and perch and everything else that muskies eat. That's definitely not what we're saying. But when a main forage base is a little smaller, it's not a bad idea to downsize. And again, we're still throwing on the heavier type setups. Like I said, this rod is actually rated 3/8 to 1 1/8 of an ounce. Still running the 50-pound braid. This way we can get the hooks in them, we can control the fish, land them quickly and safely, and we're still able to throw these type of baits, 1/2 ounce, 3/8 ounce baits, and even that heavier rod for our inlines. Now, one thing you heard Eric mention about was catching his one muskie on a skirted jig and a craw trailer. And the Minnesota DNR had actually done studies a few years back, and muskies do eat crawfish, believe it or not. Especially if you're in a situation where you have rocks or any type of structure that'll hold the craws and the wind's blowing through them, and those craws will get thrown up out of the cover, muskies will grab them. Now, I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that I'm going out hunting muskies with craw imitating baits. That is not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, if you guys are diehard bass guys and you want a shot at a muskie and you got a good jig bite going, don't think you're hindering yourselves that you won't get a pike or a muskie. We've caught tons of pike on plastics, Cincos, curly tail worms, soft plastic jerkbaits, you name it, they'll eat them. But generally speaking, right now, with learning this water, fishing it for the first time ourselves, even with Eric's guidance, we're still moving, covering water quickly, and there is just so much water to be had out here. So many different pools. So the key is being mobile, being versatile, and really fishing your strengths, which we know, inline spinners, safety pin style spinners, red eyes, things like that. Now we talked about, in our opening segment there, about the two main colors of the musky attackers, that Frenchie model that I'm going to try running here. And the first one, actually, there was one right there. Right, running this bucktail right on the edge. The downside, of course, we can't figure eight these fish. But she came out right off the weed edge towards that first break. Literally came in, and as fast as she got in on it, she turned off the other direction. Twisted on me. So there is the downside to the shore side of things for this. We can't obviously figure eight. I will also say though, that fish didn't stay in on it all the way up until she got in front of me. But what we actually did is we threw parallel, because like Eric and I have been talking about, we have these weed flats here right near shore, and they jet out to that first break, and then it'll break down to about 7.5 feet of water here. And those fish a lot of times will sit on the edges of these breaks. Now when we're casting straight out towards this island, we're actually able to hit the weed flat and break line there, bring the bait over open water, and then we're coming across the break line up into the weed flat here. Another good option is paralleling either right or left down the shoreline and being able to actually work that edge. And that's exactly where I had that fish come up. It wasn't super big. I don't think she would have gone 30, probably about 28 tops, but it was definitely a muskie. Came up, literally showed herself, got up onto the bait, and pretty much turned and went back down off the break line there. Again though, slight change of color. We talked about, I was throwing that bluegill, changed to the baby bass pattern. It goes back to matching the hatches here. Bluegills, baby bass, small shad. The atomic shad pattern from Musky Attacker would work great out here. Baby blue, baby bass, bluegill. But just a slight change of color actually made a big difference in moving that fish. Bluegill wasn't showing up as well as I had liked it to. It's kind of a little bit of a tea stain almost, not a real dark tea stain by any means. But I was kind of losing a little bit. I didn't like the way the gold was with the sunny skies. I wanted a silver blade, and actually another little trick we did was instead of running a straight flat French blade, we went to the hammered nickel French blade. So it's going to cause a little more flash, a little more light refraction. And in this color of water, it definitely helped us there. We were able to move that first fish, get her to come up and look at a bait. Muskies are, of course, notorious for stuff like that. So just little things we can do to tweak our baits to actually help us get more fish to go out here. And it's the perfect spot. This is exactly what muskies and pike love to relate to. We have cabbage, we have a little bit of milfoil, we've got the break lines to open water, current pushing through here thanks to the breeze blowing. I mean, this is exactly what we want. So the key was finding a color pattern or a bait that'll actually move them. What can we do to get their attention? Now there can be a great debate over whether or not to come out to a body of water, a new body of water like this, and whether to fish from shore right off the bat or bring the boats out. Because here at Busse, you can bring your fishing boats. It's trolling motor only, can't run the outboards. But for me, living down in Plainfield, it's a little bit of a cruise to get up here. Not too bad. So before I start bringing the Ranger out this way or anything like that, what I kind of like doing on these bodies of water is being able to walk around. I can see a few spots. Now, I am limited. I can't do anything offshore wise as far as marking with the electronics or, fishing some of the other islands that are unreachable from shore, but I can get a good idea of areas that I want to fish with the boat, such as this channel between the island. You think about it, most guys would think, well, it's been a slow bite this way. Well, it has been. You change the direction, though, of those baits, rather than those baits coming across, back into shore. When you switch it around and you give them the different angle, a little different presentation, it can also make a world of difference. So in a way, we're also scouting for the boat situation. But you don't have to necessarily come out here and bring the boats right off the bat. You can get an idea of a lot of the areas on this big body of water, just walking the shores, get an idea what everything looks like. And it doesn't matter what species you're fishing for, you can contact them from shore here. We've already had action. We've had a pike up, we've had that muskie follow and swipe and miss. I mean, there's no reason to immediately jump right to the boats. Now in the boat, can you cover more water more efficiently? Sure, we can be on the move a lot more. But before I'm bringing the boat out on a forest preserve lake such as this, bigger bodies of water, obviously, where we're making destinations, yes, of course, the boat goes right off the bat. But when we're in a forest preserve situation like this, I really do think walking the shorelines is a good option before you bring the boats out, just so you can get an idea, gauge the surroundings before you jump into the boat. Well, we convinced Eric to come to the dark side here. And we were talking about different little baits for the muskies we could throw. We actually went to a mini bulldog, the little baby dog. And lo and behold, first cast, sticks a largemouth on it. But this is definitely one thing we talked about, is that these smaller musky baits will trigger the largemouth. It's not that we're strictly going to be stuck just with muskies only. I mean, just totally inhaled the mini dog.
Oh, and he's not a big bass. I mean,
nope.
But he sure ate it. He's got a little tumor in his mouth.
There we go. I mean, look at that. Like I said, literally what we call our downsized musky baits, that mini bulldog is what actually produced that fish. It's not a real small fish, but I mean, it's not a big bass either. So don't be afraid to think that you're going to miss out on anything just walking around throwing these smaller musky baits. There's one. We just need to find one with teeth now. And we've made a little move. We actually got back in the vehicles and came back and went to one of the nearer entrances here at Busse. Nearer parking lots, rather, to the entrance. And essentially all we really did was we're just down probably, good 250 yards from actually where we were. But rather than trying to walk through the forest, it was a lot easier to reposition down here. We're near the a little bridge section here. Talking with Eric, it's a very good crappie area. So if you know you got crappies, you're going to have some food for them. So you're going to have some small shad. You got the crappies down here. So it's the food source that our pike and muskies are looking for. The bass as well will be up in this section too. We're going to keep attacking it with our bucktails, our spinnerbaits, red eyes. Eric's still throwing that little mini dog. And surprisingly enough, we got that one bass to go. We know it's a color and a size that fish are going to move on. And that's another thing, you know, we were talking about while we were moving. Think about a bulldog, okay? It's that curly tail to it. Well, if you don't have another bulldog, what can you do? Well, if you have a package of grubs, you can add a grub onto your spinnerbait. You can add a grub onto your bucktails. Sometimes it's that little teaser action that they're looking for. So you just kind of let the fish dictate what exactly they're looking for. Now, true, it was a largemouth, not a member of the Esox family. But I can guarantee you, if Eric goes up another fish or two on me, I'll be making some changes myself here. But it is one thing to keep in mind and keep in the back of your mind that these fish will tell you throughout the course of the day what it is that they're looking for. Sometimes they don't want fast moving. Sometimes they want it slower, more subtle presentations. Water's fairly warm. We did notice a little change in the water clarity here. Where we first started out, we kind of had a little more stain to it. This is much, much clearer. The baby bass muskie attacker bucktail is really showing up very well. I can see that blade flashing the full length out on the cast, the colors in the skirt showing up good. That's another thing. You want to be able to see your presentations, but keep them somewhat natural. You notice when we first started with that safety pin style spinnerbait, it was like a blue shad with a little bit of chartreuse. It's okay to have contrasting colors, but we really don't want to go out into a clearer body of water and throw the real bright stuff. So keeping it natural and making sure that, you know, everything is visible in the water at the same time. Hence why we went to that nickel blade, the hammer nickel, had that fish come up right away, that muskie, and turn on it. This one?
I'm just swimming at normal speed, you know, not too fast, not too slow. And I felt the fish pick it up, and he started moving away from shore, and when I hit him, he was gone. I think he just had it by the tail, because it does have a long tail on it.
So you got to be a little bit more patient in the future?
Yeah. You know how it gets when you get excited when you're hooked up. You want to crack that fish right away. Just got to give them a little bit more.
Like I said, when you're first coming out here, and if it's your first trip to Busse, it's your first trip, I don't care if it's any body of water. There's going to be some learning involved. And that's one thing we're definitely stressing throughout this little series of episodes we're going to do is breaking down a new lake. Now we are going to keep it structured simply to Busse. A lot of viewers have always asked for it, so we're giving it to you. And we're teaching you how to break down the lakes. And in that first outing or so, like we said at the top of the show, catching a fish is the bonus. It's all about learning right off the bat. And thankfully we've had action, so we're getting our bonuses. We know we're on the right track. So this being the third spot that we've hit now on Busse, and once again, stressing that this is the first time myself and the Spot On crew has filmed here. I myself personally haven't fished here, but again, why we relied heavily on Eric's knowledge of 30 years of this body of water. Now, one key that we're focusing on and that we've seen fish moving on, we've gotten into this third section here, and Eric had missed one more on that mini dog, but we're already placing a pattern together. The channel and the weed edges. Wherever we have that channel, that 7.5 foot channel, and it comes up against the structure, has been the key, especially just being shorebound right now. We're not able to be in the boat to go out and fish a lot of these thicker mats that we're throwing towards here in this section, but we're able to fish the edges of both sides, the main flat and the side of the shoreline here. And the key has been focusing on these areas. Remember the analogy of the highway and the oasis. That's what the channel is with these flats. And already one day into learning Busse, we're already learning the secret of how it plays out here on this given body of water. As we're winding things down here on our first trip to Busse, Eric, what are some things that we can take from this trip, being it was my first time fishing out here on a what would most consider a tough day? Just what are the positives here? What can we take away from a day like today?
Well, we just have to play to our strengths and remember all of our tactics and just keep using them. I mean, if you always give up on a body of water just because you didn't have a good day, then you're never going to improve yourself. You have to just keep imparting your techniques and keep going at it. Some days we're going to catch 30, 40 fish. Some days we're going to catch 2. So, I mean, you just got to keep going at it.
Absolutely. And I mean, we're also out here pounding this thing. We had a front come through a couple days ago. We had a little bit more rain yesterday. Think about it, we've been in the mid to upper 80s. We're low to mid 70s today. While it's not really a cold front, it's still a cold front.
Yeah.
But I mean, we had a pike follow, we've had muskies follow. You caught that largemouth on the mini dog, and haven't had another miss on the mini dog as well. So I mean, action from 4 fish on a big body of water, and on a rough day, rough weather pattern day. Bluebird skies, really not much cloud cover either.
And we didn't even scratch the surface of the places that you can fish on this lake. We just picked a few spots and tried it. So
exactly,
it was a hit or miss.
Tons of water out here, lots to learn. And what we can do is basically take a day or two, we process everything, think about it again. The spots we worked, how does it all come together? And you think about mapping it out in your head, and those are the areas we can continue to look towards the next time we come out. We know the presentations, we know the colors, now we're starting to understand the structures. Mm-hmm. So while it wasn't a gangbusters day, we still had a lot of learning, and we still, on a rough weather day after all these fronts, we still had action from fish on top of that on a new body of water. So as we continue, like I say, we're going to be back out here a few more times this season, dissecting Busse and showing you exactly how we're learning it and how you can break it down and catch more fish out here. Eric, I thank you, sir, for coming out.
Thanks for inviting me.
Can't wait to do it again, man. Once again, my name's Tony Krizek. We'll see you next week on Tony's Spot On Fishing.